The repair bill said £300,000. The previous owner looked at that number, looked at the car, and made the only rational decision available to them. They walked away. The car was repossessed. It entered the salvage market at a fraction of its real value because everyone who looked at it made the same calculation. The gearbox is broken. Bugatti says the gearbox costs £300,000 to fix. The math does not work. Move on. Then Matt Armstrong bought it and fixed it with a fuse he picked up from Halfords. £5. That is the price of the part that was standing between a working £2 million supercar and the scrap heap. Not a rebuilt gearbox. Not a specialist component sourced from a factory in Molsheim, France. A fuse. The kind of thing that sits in a plastic box on a shelf next to the car cleaning products at your local motor parts shop. And the moment Matt installed it, the gearbox that Bugatti had declared beyond economical repair came back to life completely. This is not the first time Matt Armstrong has done this to Bugatti. And that is exactly why the automotive world is losing its mind right now. Matt Armstrong is a British YouTuber who has built one of the most watched car channels in the world by doing one thing consistently and extremely well. He buys broken supercars that official dealerships and manufacturer service networks have written off, and he fixes them. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, Porsches. A Bentley Continental GT that helped grow his audience during the pandemic and establish the format his channel is now built on. His approach is always the same. Start simple. Check the obvious things first. Do not assume the most expensive diagnosis is the correct one. Do not let a repair estimate from an official network substitute for actual investigation. He has a Bugatti logo tattooed on his leg. That detail matters because it tells you this is not someone approaching these cars from the outside. This is someone who has genuine reverence for what Bugatti builds, which makes what he has found inside two of their cars so uncomfortable for the brand to address. The Veyron that became the center of this story is one of the most significant production cars ever made. When it launched in 2005, it was the fastest production car in the world. A 16-cylinder engine with 4 turbochargers producing over 1,000 horsepower. Bugatti reportedly spent more than £5 million building each one and sold them for around £1 million each, losing money on every single car. They were not making money on the Veyron. They were making a statement. And the statement was that nobody else on Earth could build something like this. The gearbox in the Veyron is a dual-clutch unit. A complex system that manages the enormous power output from that 16-cylinder engine and distributes it to all 4 wheels. When something goes wrong with it, Bugatti's official position is straightforward. They do not open the gearbox and look inside. They do not diagnose individual components. They replace the entire unit as one sealed assembly. No exceptions. No investigation of whether a simpler problem might exist inside the system. The whole box. Every time. £300,000. The previous owner of this particular Veyron was told exactly that. The gearbox has a fault. The car will not shift out of park. The fix is a sealed unit replacement at £300,000. The owner looked at a car that might be worth a similar amount in working condition and concluded the obvious thing. You cannot spend £300,000 repairing a car to get a car worth £300,000 back. The economics are impossible. So they surrendered it. It was repossessed, entered the salvage market, and Matt Armstrong bought it for what sources describe as a significantly reduced price. In the world of a £2 million supercar, significantly reduced could still mean a very large number. But whatever he paid, he bought it knowing the £300,000 diagnosis was attached to it. And he bought it because he did not believe the diagnosis was the whole story. What happened when he started looking is the reason millions of people have now watched this story. And it raises a question that Bugatti has not yet found a comfortable way to answer. The first thing Matt did when he got the car into his workshop was bring in outside help. He contacted a specialist named Ricky from a company called RE Performance who could connect to the Veyron's diagnostic system remotely, essentially plugging into the car's onboard computer from a distance and reading what every sensor in the vehicle was reporting. Modern supercars are as much computers as they are machines. Every system has sensors. Every sensor sends data to a central control unit. If you know how to read that data, you can understand what the car thinks is happening inside itself, which is very different from what is actually happening. Ricky started running commands through the system. He tried to activate the secondary air pump. Nothing responded. He tried the gearbox pressure pump next. And here is where the diagnostic picture became genuinely interesting. The computer reported that the command had been sent and the system had responded. The data on the screen showed the pump behaving as expected. But Matt was standing next to the car and could not hear anything. No pump noise. No pressure building. The system believed it was doing its job. In reality, nothing was moving at all. That specific gap between what a computer thinks is happening and what is physically happening usually means one of two things. Either the sensor reporting the activity is lying to the system, or the electrical signal leaving the computer is not actually reaching the component it is meant to control. Something is interrupting the circuit between the command going out and the hardware receiving it. And the most common cause of that interruption is also the simplest and cheapest thing in the entire electrical system of any car ever built. A fuse. A fuse is a small piece of wire sealed inside a plastic housing. It is rated for a specific amount of electrical current. If the current running through it exceeds that rating, the wire melts, the circuit breaks, and no power gets through. That is the entire function. The fuse sacrifices itself so that the more expensive components it is protecting do not take the damage instead. Every car has dozens of them. They sit in a fuse box. They cost almost nothing. Checking them takes 30 seconds. Replacing a blown one takes about the same amount of time and costs between £2 and £5 depending on the rating. If the official Bugatti service network had checked the fuses before issuing a £300,000 repair estimate, this story does not exist. The car gets fixed for pocket change and the previous owner keeps their Veyron. Matt went to the fuse box and started working through every single fuse by hand. He did not have a wiring diagram. He did not know which fuse controlled which system. He just started checking them one at a time, looking for the one that had failed. Most of them were fine. Then he found it. The fuse was completely destroyed, burned through. Whatever had been inside it was long gone. But the story did not stop there, because what Matt found next made the situation considerably more revealing. The fuse that had blown was a 40-amp mini fuse. That matters because 40-amp mini fuses are not a standard size. The normal ratings for that type of fuse are 10, 15, 20, and sometimes 30 amps. Someone had installed a non-standard component in that position on purpose. The reason someone does that is specific and telling. If a fuse keeps blowing, it means the circuit is drawing more current than the fuse is rated for. The correct response is to find out why. The incorrect response, and the one that clearly happened here, is to keep replacing the blown fuse with a higher rated one until one finally holds. Someone had worked up through the available ratings until the 40 amp stayed in long enough not to fail immediately. But eventually even that one burned out. And when it did, the circuit had no protection at all. The car stopped working. The gearbox pressure pump received no power. The gearbox could not build pressure. The car would not shift out of park. Matt removed the destroyed fuse and supplied 12 volts directly to the circuit manually. The gearbox pressure pump activated immediately. He installed a correct rated fuse in the position where the burnt one had been. The pump ran, built pressure to the correct level, and shut off exactly as designed. He got in the car, shifted out of park, reverse, neutral, drive, every gear engaged. The car worked. A 5-pound fuse from a high-street motor parts shop. That was the £300,000 repair. The fuse fix was remarkable. But it was not the end of the story because Matt Armstrong was honest about something that most viral headlines left out. He said it himself in his own words on camera. Fuses do not just end up like that on their own. There is always something further down the line causing the problem. And he was right. The fuse fix made the car drivable. But the investigation it opened up revealed that the Veyron had additional issues: persistent cylinder misfires, damaged wiring to the hydraulic gearbox pump, and a leaking radiator. The car had a history that went beyond the blown fuse, and the work required to truly restore it to the standard a £2 million machine deserves is considerably more complex than a trip to Halfords. That context matters. Because the story is not simply that Matt fixed a £300,000 problem for £5 and drove away. The story is that a 5-pound fuse was all that stood between a working supercar and the scrap heap, and nobody in the official service network found it before declaring the repair economically impossible. Whatever additional work the Veyron needs, the question of why the diagnosis started at £300,000 without first checking the basic electrical components is one Bugatti cannot easily explain away. And this was the second time Matt Armstrong had put them in that position. The Bugatti Chiron per Sport saga that preceded the Veyron story began in October 2025. The car belonged to American content creator Alex Gonzalez and had suffered severe crash damage, crumpled front end, deployed airbags, damaged carbon fiber, a compromised transmission. Insurance quotes reached $1.7 million. Bugatti themselves offered a factory repair, then revised it to $600,000. Gonzalez turned that down and asked Matt Armstrong to attempt the rebuild on camera instead. Bugatti's response to that decision was to blacklist the vehicle's VIN number, effectively preventing any authorized dealership anywhere in the world from supplying parts to support the rebuild. The company's position, as stated by CEO Mate Rimac, was that repairing a Chiron outside the official network posed unacceptable safety risks, given the complexity of the engineering involved. Matt Armstrong kept going anyway. He sourced parts through alternative channels. He brought in specialists including a machinist known as Bob from the machine shop who performed significant mechanical work on the rebuild. He improvised where official parts were unavailable, using a section of rigid brake hose to fix a pinched coolant pipe when no Bugatti components were coming. The car eventually started. It went on its first test drive. The rebuild that Bugatti said should not happen outside their network happened anyway. Armstrong has spoken about his relationship with Rimac in interviews, comparing it to a rivalry between two people who actually respect each other, but find themselves on opposite sides of a corporate conflict that neither of them entirely controls. He described them as having mutual friends and a shared love of the same cars. He said the tension came from what he called the corporate world getting mixed into it. That is a diplomatic way of describing something more straightforward. Bugatti's business model depends in part on the assumption that their vehicles can only be properly serviced and repaired within their authorized network. Every time Matt Armstrong buys a car they have declared beyond economical repair and returns it to working condition outside that network, he demonstrates that the assumption is not always accurate. The sealed gearbox replacement policy exists for real reasons. These are extraordinarily complex machines and the risk of doing additional damage through incorrect repairs is genuine. But a policy that skips basic electrical diagnosis before recommending a £300,000 replacement is not a safety policy. It is a revenue policy. How many other Veyrons have been written off for the same reason? How many owners have been handed six-figure estimates for problems that a careful technician working through the basic checks would have found in an afternoon? Nobody has that number. But the fact that Matt Armstrong has now bought two Bugattis that the official network declared unsalvageable, and returned both of them to working condition, suggests the answer is not zero. He bought a car with a £300,000 repair bill attached to it. He fixed the immediate problem with a 5-pound fuse from a shop on the high street. He was honest that more work remained. And then he kept going. That has always been the Matt Armstrong formula. Start simple. Check everything. Do not accept the estimate until you have seen the problem for yourself. Bugatti has not yet found a comfortable answer to what that formula keeps revealing.